Well, wait a second. We have, Will is still coming, but he can join us. We have a quorum.
We have a
He
quorum.
can join us if he needs to. He said he was going to.
Recording.
So I will call the meeting to order and we stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
God willing.
God willing. Thank you very much. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Happy New Year. There he is. Sitting on the dais tonight are Adrian Pickering, our first alternate. Will Sharp just came in. John Parker is with us via Zoom. Herb Samwell, yours truly, Marianne Eddy, and just to my right, Lily Fell. Before we get into the public comments portion of the meeting, there's two quick things I want to mention. Originally, it was my hope that our building inspector was going to come and speak during the public commentary period to Tian Hoso, just to talk a little bit about, some of their procedures and the way they approach things, and some of the things that have frankly, raised questions here as to how things are actually done. And without getting into any specific, application that may or may not be pending, he was going to do that in a way similarly to the way the harbor master did. But unfortunately, he had a death in the family. So on behalf of the committee, I would like to extend our condolences to Tian and his family. And on a more joyous note, now Doris, you have to correct me if I'm wrong on this, but today marks 24 years that Doris has worked for the village or specifically the building department? What is that, Doris?
Yes, the village of Sag Harbor. I started January 2nd, 2001.
Today.
Today.
Wow, you're like 10 years old, right?
Fine.
All right, well,
So much.
that's very, very nice. We're very happy that you've been able to serve as you
Thank you,
have
Doris.
all these years and done a fantastic job and
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's
Thank
been
you, Doris.
a wonderful adventure. With many members and colleagues and mayors and trustees. So it's been a blessing.
they've come and gone and you've stayed here.
Yeah, that's right. You've seen them come and go.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
You've been here almost as long as Matt has.
Oh,
All right. Okay, so now for the public portion of the meeting. I'm looking for my agenda here. Did you steal mine, Lily?
No,
Okay.
this one.
Okay, for the public portion, I don't see that on the agenda for some reason, but I am going to ask if anybody is from the public, anybody from the public would like to speak, or if anybody is on Zoom and would like to speak. We'll limit them to a maximum of 2 minutes per speaker.
don't have any hands.
Nobody online? Anybody in the room? Okay. So that allows us to move on to section 2 of the meeting, which is our decision agenda.
Sorry, we have the
Minutes, gotta read the minutes.
Sorry,
Approve.
sorry, JR. The minutes.
Right.
I apologize. For the minutes, I actually had a brief comment with Doris about maybe about Harding Terrace and specifically just saying that there were questions and that there were concerns raised by the Harbor Committee members on the issue of the IA system there. Other than that, I have no other comments on the meeting, on the minutes. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes?
No, no.
No, they're all right for me.
John?
That's fine. I went over them earlier, so yes.
Okay, good. Can I have a resolution to approve the minutes, please?
Make a motion to approve.
Make a
the
motion. Do I have a
minutes.
second?
Second.
Okay, I'll approve. Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Can I, we've done the public session as far as I'm concerned, so that's that. So next would be the decision section of the meeting. 48 Redwood LLC. Brant, you want to just give us a quick kind of update as to where we are and what the next step? I have looked over the resolution of approval. I'm assuming that all of our committee members have.
This is a application for 46 Redwood LLC.
46, 48.
Sorry, 48 Redwood LLC. First of all, Happy New Year to all of you.
Happy New Year.
Hope you had a nice holiday. So yeah, this is an application for 48 Redwood Road LLC, located at 48 Redwood Road, Sag Harbor. The application was for a swimming pool and some other site improvements inclusive of a fixed catwalk to access the water. The application in general meets the statutory requirements. The background was such that there was an application submitted in September 2023, deemed sufficiently complete in 2024 and scheduled for a public hearing. There were 3 hearings held in this matter. The Harbor Committee found the application to be in order, closed the public hearings on December 5th, 2024, and issued a resolution to prepare a draft permit for consideration at tonight. The permit that is before you is for, again, the construction of a swimming pool, a 16 by 26 foot swimming pool located 8 feet from wetlands, swimming pool fence, approximately 75 feet from wetlands, swimming pool and equipment and enclosures more than 148 feet from wetlands, a couple of dry wells, 110 feet from wetlands, patio, a paper patio, 79 feet from wetlands, retaining walls, approximately 80 feet from wetlands, and then again, the construction of a fixed pier catwalk, approximately 112 feet long, with pass and repass steps designed to allow public access over the dock, leading to a 6 by 10 fixed platform with a safety ladder. This application also includes the establishment of a 4,000 square foot, 50-foot wide, passively restored, non-disturbance, non-fertilization wetland buffer to satisfy the village's Chapter 285 standards, as well as the installation of the IAOWPS. The application was found to be in order and was deemed a type 2 action under SECRA. Found to be generally consistent with the Chapter 275 standards with regards to the LWRP criteria, and that had to do with the dock. And therefore, this permit is under consideration with the standard conditions outlined in the Harbor Committee permits, and I can go through them each if you would like, but they're standard to your general permit conditions.
All right, the meeting is closed, is that correct?
Your hearings are closed.
Okay, hearing is closed, I should say. Do we have any comments from our committee members?
No?
I have a question, Brant.
Yes, sir.
What does passively restored mean?
So actually, that's a good question. As part of the conditions of your permit, and this was discussed with the applicant during the deliberations with regards to passively versus actively. Active restoration means that they go in and they remove materials, either lawn or invasives, and they plant back with plant stock, new native vegetation. Passive restoration is working with the vegetation that's there and allowing it to restore naturally. So they're going to be weeding out the invasive material over time where they can, and allowing the native habitat or a consistent, we'll call it ecologically beneficial habitat to be restored. They're required to do so through a rigorous monitoring program where they submit to the committee, who will reassign it to the committee's environmental consultant, that's NPD at this time. to oversee the monitoring and do inspections with the applicant's agent and make adjustments as necessary to ensure that the passive restoration is effective.
And you do that initially when they're applying for a C of O, so you sort of commemorate what's planted there? And then annually, how does that go? Remind me, I know we've talked about this many times.
So when the project is complete and they're ready to apply for their CO,
Right,
they need to put the harbor committee on notice, and that's written into the condition as well. That they will submit to the harbor committee and the building department that the work is completed. It will, there'll need to be a requirement between the building inspector and the harbor committee that there is an inspection required by the harbor committee's consultant, that would be NPV, to actually go out and verify that, yes, in this case, the passive restoration is commenced. Here is our baseline.
right.
If there was an invasive species removal component of the project, have they started? What's the status of that? And then we set our baseline based upon the information available at that time. And then once the CO is issued, we recognize that, the baseline is established, whether it's through a passive restoration or an active restoration, then that 3-year clock starts. So they have 3 years to ensure that the survivability rate of that buffer is at 85% or greater. That 85% means that it's 85% survival of native plant materials. And in order to determine that, they have to go out and inventory the vegetation that's there and saying that the native habitat is repairing itself to that extent. If it is not, they'll have to reevaluate whether or not more rigorous methods would be necessary to get it to come into compliance.
And you participate in that judgment at 3 years?
Yes, we're
Yeah,
here
yeah.
for the village to offer that kind of
Yeah.
consultation.
Okay.
But it does specify in the conditions that the person assisting the property owner or the applicant would need to be a qualified professional.
And the process is the same, whether it's
Active or passive?
active or passive, exactly, right?
Well, the difference between the active and the passive is that when it comes time for our initial inspection before the CO, we would determine if the planting plan for the
Has been
active restoration
executed.
was actually executed properly. We at that moment have the ability to say, no, the active restoration does not match the approved plan. And if there were adjustments, make an interpretation with the harbor committee if necessary. If the changes to the planting plan are still consistent with the native habitat that was intended to be designed or installed. So again, the difference is with the active restoration, we would be there to say, yes, the planting plan has been satisfied. The CO can be issued, but the 3-year clock will still commence at that point. If the active planting plan is not found sufficient, we would recommend the CO not be issued until the planting plan is properly addressed. And then the clock will be held off until that CO. With the passive, it's pretty obvious that we would start that clock from the initial inspection to say, okay, with the documentation provided by the applicant's agent, we'll have a baseline of photographs to say, here's where it looked like, here's what the final survey shows as the limit of the passive restoration. And next year, we're expecting to see a report that gives an update on the status. What's the percentage of survival? What plants are you seeing? What plants were we expecting? And what do we got to do to make adjustments? Because we hope your soup's gonna be better. Again, passive, think progressive, they should be progressing in the right direction year after year. And if they're not, they're probably gonna want to reconsider whether or not the passive is actually appropriate for that location. Because passive restoration is not for every location, there's.
Can you just briefly touch on why that is the case? Because there is some concern that by allowing or approving a so-called passive restoration, that we're are setting a precedent. And I wonder if, not in this particular case, but I wonder if going forward, it's something that you can imagine being somewhat abused. like somebody going in and clearing their property and saying, well, it's cleared, I'm just gonna allow it all to grow back and I'm not gonna have to do anything else. How would you distinguish between sites which are appropriate for a passive restoration plan and those that would require an active restoration plan?
So generally, when you're dealing with manicured landscaping, whether it be a lawn or just ornamental materials, passive restoration is much more challenging. You know, you don't really have much to play with. The idea of passive is that there's a seed stock available to allow the native materials to grow back. A lot of times it's a grasp, you know, like they're really gonna be challenged to make it work, but this board puts into writing that it's on the applicant to be able to execute that passive restoration. If you can, the fallback is that if you can't demonstrate that 85% success rate of native vegetation being reestablished, then the fallback is, well, okay, now you have to.
You have to go in and
active
supplement.
restoration to supplement it. I prefer hybrids, you know, sometimes even in a passive restoration, we consistently would pocket plant
Right,
help the growth or even provide additional seed stock to whatever's trying to establish there to help it out. But I will say to your point is a lawn without any canopy of native trees, very unlikely to be a passive
Right,
restoration
right,
opportunity,
right.
you know, so
And then
So-
each site is a little bit different, so.
each site is different, you know, like it's something that this board should really consider. Go out and look at each site, you know, we go out and look at them. You should go out and look at them as well and say,
yeah.
I challenge you as the applicant to fully demonstrate to us how this passive restoration is gonna work.
That you're gonna like it.
Well, that's, I guess that's more subjective, but,
Right.
you know, the objectivity is that 85% plus of native vegetation, that's mathematics.
Yeah, what has the best chance of achieving the village's goals in any of these things, so. All right,
It's a
Native planting.
cost benefit analysis too, like, you know, the initial savings for an applicant in the passive restoration could be significant. You
Right,
know, native plants especially, getting the right ones, it's a little bit expensive.
it
you
is
know?
indeed.
So it's a commitment on the applicant's part. But I will say that if you attempt to go the passive route, there needs to be a recognition that it's just not, we're just gonna let it go to whatever it goes to.
seed, right,
It's go to a passive native habitat restoration, not just let it revert back to a weedy invasive habitat that's
So-
spread to the neighboring property.
how do you calculate the 85%? Is that 85% of the area that's declared buffer that needs this kind of treatment? Or is it 85% of the plants that are growing there are native?
It's 85% of the area overall.
80,
Some areas might even start with that, you know, they might start with 80+%. So it's very easy to do a full passive restoration where you're just maybe managing the weedy, you know,
right,
invasive
and letting
stuff.
it come back,
Others are much more challenging, where you have probably 15-20% of native materials. You go out and actually count them. Larger areas are more difficult, smaller areas are more easy to manage in terms of counting and getting that number correct. You know, MPB is not gonna go out there and specifically count each of the plants, you know, we'll do more of an overall view and relying on the applicant's agent who is qualified to do this kind of stuff. Either it's a native landscape expert or an ecologist or a landscape ecologist or a landscape architect who has a native habitat understanding. Those are qualified experts, you know, and we'll, you know, we are your qualified experts to know when we go out to the site that this is in fact looking more like a native habitat or it's not getting to that 85% survival rate. We'll probably make recommendations along the way as we get the annual reports. I think that's, you know, a good practice for the village to work with its constituents and its citizens to say, you know, we're not just gonna wait for years and say, oh, no, that didn't work. The idea of the annual report is to sort of make an assessment along the way and say, hey, passive restoration isn't seemingly going your way. Maybe you want to consider doing some kind of supplemental plantings, bring it back to the board with a very quick planting plan and figure out if that is more conducive to what you're looking.
All right, that answers my question for sure. Anybody else have any
That's-
comments or
Thank you
questions?
very much.
All right.
I have a question. Is there a minimum setback for the leaching fields to the property line?
To the property line?
Uh-huh.
That's a
I think
health
it's
department
10
question. I
feet.
want to say yes, I think it's 10 feet.
I
Matt
think
was-
it's 10 feet because I have that problem.
The unit itself,
Retaining wall is 10 feet and they get variances.
because I don't see any dimensions on these, and obviously it's gonna get reviewed by the health department during the,
So your permits recognize that, you know, that the applicant is responsible for getting permits from other agencies execute the project. And a building permit is likely not going to be issued without a health department.
yeah. Okay,
Good question.
thanks.
Brett, just to follow up on the initial question, and this may pertain more to other applications than necessarily than this one. But by having a passive plan, does that give a little bit more discretion? And I'm thinking about it and somewhat concerned about the native plant requirement here, because I know that being able to remember what it looked like 75 years ago here, there weren't a lot of plants in areas where we're putting in buffers. And so there are plants that I see being put in, which may be in general native to the area, but weren't necessarily native to, to Sag Harbor and our beach areas. And you could have some very nice trees, for instance, which may not be specifically native, but are appropriate to, that kind of seaside, location. And I wouldn't want to require that everything be taken out, just because, you couldn't document that it was there, originally.
All right. Quick response, and that's, we'll go to a vote. Do you have any comments on that, Fran, or?
Well, all I can say, John, is that the idea of native restorations or native habitats is to create a quote unquote wildlife habitat that is conducive to the wildlife that is been known to and documented as native to this region. The habitat provides ecological benefits and the native species that is documented to this region, not specifically to Sag Harbor. I don't know that there's been any studies that actually break down the regions into micro
Territories?
yeah,
No,
that would be specific to Sag Harbor in general, but there are specific types of habitats that are conducive to different settings. You have oak heath forest, you've got coastal seaside environments, and when we do those types of reviews, so when we review planting plans, we look at them for their specificity in terms of the environment in which they're being placed. So
Okay.
they're eco types, and the plants that are going into them should be ecotype specific.
All right, great.
Well, Brett, just to follow up, but we're trying to put in buffers, places where originally there was nothing but sand. And there's very little other than beach grass that's gonna, that's gonna grow there, unless you're bringing in water, fertilizer, et cetera. And a lot of the things that grow now, because of the high levels of nitrogen in the water, both the groundwater and the rainwater, et cetera, grow, but wouldn't grow 30, 40, 50 years ago, there. So I mean, it's the question of what the baseline is, here. So I won't go on about it, but if you look at earlier pictures, you're going to see what was originally there, and it's not what we're requiring now.
Yeah, well, it
But I
sounds like
don't
a
think
much
that's what we're
broader
trying to
issue.
do, Yeah,
Much broader issue than we're going to be able to
As I
resolve.
say, it's not specific necessarily
Very
to this
interesting.
application, but just some of the language here,
Yeah, yeah.
raised questions for me.
All right, thank you, John.
real
Right.
quick, yes or no. If in fact, like when it goes to the health department goes, oh, no. You gotta move this 6 feet that way or 7 feet that way or whatever. And there's a change in the way the sanitary system is set up. Does it then come back to us if things have changed significantly?
I'm generally, the health department, DC permits are already in place when they come to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The idea-
I thought you had mentioned they were going somewhere. Okay,
No, what I was saying is, hands down, before they get to the building permit, they have to have
Yes.
health department in hand. I don't know specifically, I'm fairly certain that when we get to this point that they have
Right.
those all in place, this
Yeah.
application might have already had that in place, but yes, if they make a change to any of the components of the site plan, they would be subject to coming back to you for a modification, and that's written into your permits.
Good question. All right, guys, do I hear any more comments? Do I have a motion
I
to
make a
approve?
motion to
Mary Ann?
approve this.
Second?
Thank you.
I'll second.
Will Sharp, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matt.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Pass down the, one to be signed.
Hey, Matt.
Happy kayaking.
Yeah.
So warm. Oh
He
my-
just bought a heated kayak.
You take it out today?
I've seen him driving around with it on the rack.
On the water, I meant.
Amazing.
A little windy and cold.
Yeah, I tried to take my kayak out yesterday and then wind came up. Then
Yeah.
never got it in the water.
Well,
No.
But, oh,
sign.
okay.
Water's been crystal clear.
Okay, we're now going to move to the continued public hearings portion of the meeting, section number 3. The first item up is 53 Bay Street. Do we have anybody here from 53 Bay Street? This is having to do with the reconfiguration of the docks. Do we have what's the deal here, Brent? Do we have?
Did we ask them to redo something? I've,
We have been waiting for them to give us an update on how they were seeking to do with the marina.
right.
So adjourn this
We
and
gave them, I think we gave them the approval to do the.
It's my understanding that they're looking for, they're waiting on other departments and some kind of state department and stuff like that, and they got to the point where there's no way they can get to this project this winter. So they're in no rush to get back to us.
Good.
Well, at some
Until they
point,
get through other permits.
well, why don't we adjourn
There's,
it now and then we'll have to get some clarity from them before the next meeting as to
Mhm.
whether it should be withdrawn or however they want to proceed. Does that make sense?
what's the general rule, Herb? Like we adjourn it for a certain number of times and if they don't come and we don't have a discussion, then we end up saying, well, let's just start over. What's the rule? Do you have a rule?
Request, it's from last month, it was this month, so now
So this would be the third adjournment?
second.
Second.
I think that's within
Yeah,
the history of what we've done. So why don't I take a motion to adjourn until the next harbor committee meeting? Do I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Do I hear a second?
So
Oh, sorry. Well, hold on.
just amend your motion to include asking Doris to reach out to them for
Yeah.
a clearer understanding
Yes.
of the steps, because.
What's the timeline?
Yeah, like, if we're gonna sit and wait on this, maybe they
Yeah.
can ask for like a 3-month adjournment, because
Yeah.
we've got a bunch of applications in the queue, and once they're deemed complete, they'll start to fill up their agenda, and the last thing we need is anything
right.
that's
A
lingering.
placeholder for nothing, yeah.
Yeah, and if it's a simple adjournment for 3 months, we make note of that and we'll come back to it in 3 months.
Yeah.
But if they're ready to go next month, they think they're gonna be, then we'll keep it on the agenda.
All
But I
right.
would just, again, ask that you ask Doris to reach out.
Why don't we start again? I'll give Lily the opportunity to make the motion
Oh,
as amended by Brant's suggestion.
I'll make the motion to amend the,
Adjournment
Adjournment.
resolution. And second?
I second that.
Okay, Mary Ann, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous?
The record is February 6th.
Time goes by.
Time is,
All right, the second item in the public hearing portion of the meeting is the application of Mr. Richard Emery at 29 Harding Terrace. Mr. Emery is here in the audience as his attorney, Denise Shawn, his esteemed attorney, Denise Shawn. Oh, you may indeed. Just please introduce yourself if you don't mind.
Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
My name is Denise Sherman. I am the attorney set for the applicant. It's for Richard Emery, who is here with me tonight with the board. You should have in front of you, if you don't, it's a letter that I submitted, just right before Christmas, explaining that we would like to include our applicant request to legalize the stairs on the property and also to get a permit for the retaining wall. Just anyone first, I need a copy of the letter just before I start.
No, we have it here.
Okay, got it. So, as we discussed in our last meeting, this is an application for, the very small additions, second story additions of the existing dwelling. The issue that I think figured out last month was the installation of a septic system or an upgraded septic system as a condition of approval for that. As I explained to you, Mr. Emery has some concerns about having that as a condition of the approval for his additions to his residence, because there's not a nexus between the two of them. He's not opposed to putting in the septic system. He just would like some time.
Yep.
to do that.
Denise, Mayor, is it also fair to say that another concern, and maybe you can explain this to us, is that if it were to be compulsory or a condition of the approval, he would lose at least part of his flexibility with respect to getting compensation from either the county or the town, I should say, or from the county via the new sales tax.
That's exactly right. So-
Say
Can you
that
explain
again.
that to us a bit?
I'm
Sure.
confused.
So what's been explained to us is that there's a pool of money that's available. And the highest priority goes to those people who are doing it voluntarily versus having it be a condition of approval. So if you get in there and you're on their list, of course, you want to be in the highest spot that you can be, which would be having it not be a condition of an approval, but doing it voluntarily.
Have there ever been any applicants that have been rejected on that basis?
I don't know the answer to that. I apologize. Kelly Risotto from Land Use Ecological did that research for us. She's on vacation.
Brant, do you know of any? It seems to me that there's more money than there are applicants for I.
Well, I think we need to talk about which grant you're talking about. Now, this house is in East Hampton, so there are grants from East Hampton Town. There's also grants from Suffolk County.
True.
And Suffolk County is very complex, that 1/8% sales tax. You're gonna start collecting that in March. I've been waiting in line for this for 5 years.
As a
Okay.
voluntary,
As a voluntary installation.
As
they're
a,
not being
yes,
required to do it, but,
right, but that's not the problem.
okay.
The problem is, well, I guess maybe it's linked, but it's more drastic than that. It's not even that my system is failing or not, it's not collapsing. They have it so tight right now, and what they will give money for, the grants at Suffolk County, is your system actually has to be imploded,
That's the last thing you want.
huh?
That's horrible.
Right, but that's going to loosen up once they start getting money from the 1/8% sales tax. I think that, especially my opinion, with the delicacy of this property, I don't think that the $10,000, whether or not you get it now or you get it later, I just don't see that it's gonna be years before that logjam clears up.
There's another aspect to this that's problematic. Obviously, cost is a big factor. I don't want to downplay it at all. This is 277 square foot renovation. But with everything else that's on the table here, and the timing and the delay, it's getting beyond my means to push this through. The fact is that the other wrinkle here is that they're the only place on this small lot that a septic system can go. We are told by a consulting engineer who's going to put in the septic system that 2 fairly good sized trees have to be removed.
So who is your consulting engineer?
What was it?
TF Engineering,
Who?
David Rhodes.
David Rhodes?
Rhodes, yeah. And he has said that there's no location on the spot, on the property as it is. He says the only location which would work is the southwest corner of the property. And near the road, and as far away from the wetlands as possible. And I have no problem with that in principle. But it requires the removal of, according to him, of two very significant trees. The trees are at least, 18 inches in diameter or something along those lines.
So I work with David Rhodes and I've been working with him for 5 years.
Love to hear
And
your-
I have like a postage stamp of a yard. And he has worked really hard with various installers. And because I have major trees as well. And the lot line setbacks that you're talking about, it's really tricky. And he has come up with some very innovative things. I'd love to have his opinion directly. Can you get a statement from him?
Yeah,
Yes,
we have a
absolutely.
plan that was submitted to him and he outlined it and that's what he said. And apparently Kelly went back to him and said, can you
We
do
asked
something
again.
better? I would like to do this. But he said, no, the trees have to come down.
Do you have that in writing from David Rhodes?
We have an email from him that
Well, that's writing.
I'll get that to you.
But there was something that was brought up at the last meeting, which was that the existing septic is in the wetlands.
Right.
The existing septic, as I understand it, I'm not even positive about this, but it looks like from the survey that it is certainly in the wetlands. The question is much closer to the bay and to the wetland and to the preserve than the septic would be. In other words, it's on the north side of the house, where
Right.
this would be on the southwest side of the house.
Right, so,
I don't know.
We're looking at-
Point of clarification,
yeah,
the system is not
It's not
within
in-
wetlands.
It's not fun.
No,
what's that?
The
it's not the
system is
wetlands.
not. in the
It's in the
buffer.
Present system is not in the
The
wetlands.
existing sanitary system is 45 feet at its closest to the wetlands.
Okay, so it's in the buffer.
It's
Exactly.
within the buffer that's currently being proposed,
Mhm.
which is problematic in and of itself, because this board does not approve buffers or structures within buffers, especially sanitary
Right.
systems, because they require maintenance. What I'd like everyone to consider is that even replacing the existing system in place with an upgraded IA system is an ecological benefit.
Is.
Of course it is.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I got that
The
verb tense right.
removal of the nitrogen in and of itself is what the purpose of the treatment system is. We don't have the perfect system yet, but the best systems that we have reduce the nitrogen loading from effluent by a factor of, I think it's 3. The standard for the health.
Oh, no,
department-
it's much more than that.
Hold on, the standard for the health department is 65 milligrams per liter for a standard septic tank. That's a standard, an average that the health department recognizes for an antiquated, old school septic tank into a leaching field. The standard they recognize for IA systems is 19 milligrams per liter. So
For a
again,
3-bedroom house.
no, 19 milligrams
19
per
period.
liter
In
for the system to be able to treat the water to that
Right.
efficiency. Most of the systems recognize, the manufacturers recognize that they can treat down to much lower than
All
that.
right.
But there's a lot of differing opinions on whether or not that's actually factual. But if you look at just the health department alone, again, you're talking about a factor of just over 3 times as much nitrogen is going into the groundwater, eventually getting into the surface waters with the antiquated systems.
Right.
So if you simply took out the system that is there and replaced it with an IA system in its place, you would in fact be providing a net ecological benefit by a factor of 3.
At least.
Just mathematically speaking,
Uh-huh.
in terms of nitrogen load.
And in this case, granting a waiver from the buffer.
Well, then it comes into play, you look at the mitigatory
Right.
factors that are outlined in your code.
Mm.
The standard is a 50-foot buffer or a 50-foot equivalent. Can we get additional buffering somewhere else on the property to offset that? There are things that we can play with here. You have the ability to waive your standards when
Right.
practical alternatives are really addressed.
That was really my question. Yes.
Yeah, so What I'd like the board and the applicant, everyone to consider is that you're dealing with two major issues here. One is, can you get the 50-foot or 50-foot equivalent wetland buffer without having it over top of the sanitary system that
Right.
exists? And two, can we upgrade the sanitary system that exists, minimize the footprint that's necessary without going into that buffer as well? Or can we pull it back closer to the house? So it is a engineering
Yeah.
conundrum, as David Rhodes knows. I've known David for a long time. He is actually someone who was very pivotal in these new IA systems becoming part of the East End. So he knows them very well, and I trust in his judgment. But again, I think he would also acknowledge that putting a new advanced system, even in place of the existing system, is to the benefit of everybody, for a couple of reasons. And one is, the system that's there, it could just be cesspools. We don't know.
Just could be what, cesspools,
We
right?
don't even know if there's a tank associated with it. We just see circles on the plan. So we need an engineering report that would speak to the functionality of the system. Two, we recognize based upon the survey that you have groundwater elevation at about 1.9 or 2, and an elevation of about 6 to 7 where the system currently sits. So if you do the math, you have a 1 foot separation between grade and the top of the leaching pool or cesspool. And then you have, let's just say the smallest at the time was a 4-foot cesspool, even a 3-foot cesspool, you're in groundwater.
Right.
You're right above groundwater. There's no medium, there's no
Right.
sediment between the wastewater and the groundwater for any kind of treatment to be taking place. So this is one of those cases where we can demonstrate that the nitrogen loading coming from the house, even if it's the flush of a toilet one time, is significantly greater potential to reach the surface waters that are immediately
Right.
adjacent it
Mhm.
than most any other systems around it. So this is one of those systems where we would be trying to work with the applicant as best we can to find a solution to see if we can get the system upgraded without removing trees, or if we have to remove trees, we're really the weighing factor. What's the most
Right.
important problem that we're trying to solve right now?
And I would,
Buffering sanitary system upgrades, something that this board has really been wanting to see put into place for obvious reasons that we can document in terms of their effectiveness.
You said it right, is that it needs to be engineered so that we could look at, I think you brought up a good compromise, which is replace the existing in the same location with an IA, or get Mr. Rhodes to look at how difficult would it be really to do something on the south side of the house?
That, the south
You
side,
mean
we
the
know
north
for,
side?
No,
south side,
south side.
Oh, I see. So,
we know for sure, we can't fit without taking down the trees,
That's
because we've
fair.
had them look at that so many times now, at
I
least
pressed
3
him on
times.
that. I felt like it was appropriate to do it on the south side of the house. And he says it can't be done.
so just as an aside, David Rhodes is very well respected at the Suffolk County Department of Health. If he goes and he says that the current system is virtually sitting in groundwater, you're gonna get approved. That's my, I would think that that would be a go,
Okay.
if it's just sitting right there.
I think that that if nothing else, and I hate to make you do this, because I know that you've been here a couple of times now, but ask David to give you the options with the IA system, demonstrate if we put it at this location, these are the 2 trees that have to be removed. And if we put it here on the other side of the house, these are the situations we'd be up against. And
I
then,
mean, his position was that, well, it may be because he assumed that it would not, the committee would not waive its
Well,
its
That's
normal.
exactly-
that's a good point. Let me ask you this. Can we ask David to reach out to Brandt and to see if they can
There
come
we
up,
go.
if they can come up with something,
Happy to-
if they can come up with something, a recommendation on how we address this for the next meeting?
Because
Is that-
I think.
Is that reasonable?
I am always happy to talk to David or any applicant or yourself.
Good suggestion.
About any solutions.
yeah.
I don't wanna design your project for you.
Right.
No, we don't want you to.
I would like you to, I'd like to obviously have, say so after the fact. If you can come up with a creative solution, I'm very happy.
So what David
Let's
did,
also take something else into consideration, because there was this, putting it on the bay side of the house, everyone thinks that we're just automatically getting closer to wetlands. But in fact, he's got wetlands that hug, as
All the way
Will
around.
knows, hugs right next to the house on the east
East
side.
side.
Right.
And I honestly think if you did the apples to apples comparison of true wetland setbacks, that southeast corner where the trees are might be the same setbacks as the other side of the house on the bay side.
well, setbacks, but it may be different.
Is
It
it
may
not,
have a different dimension to groundwater.
Very slight.
Very
The
small,
elevation
small
change is
change
like
in grade.
a foot and a half.
Because one of the things that David's doing for me is we're gonna put a major component under the driveway. And that's where we get back into these setbacks, because I'm one of these cheek by jowl kind of lots right there on Hampton Street. And, yeah, we're getting like all sorts of variances from the Department of Health.
And that's exactly the kind of discussion I think you guys can have, so,
Absolutely.
okay,
Yeah.
perfect. John, do you have anything to add to this at this point?
Only to say that there's money available from East Hampton Town. They have been very liberal in terms of interpreting whether something is required or not, in terms of whether or not that might disqualify somebody. This is going to be in a priority area, and I don't think there'd be a problem with getting the funding from
Right.
East Hampton. I'll give you a hint also, which some people have done, is put in the application now. So that the application is in before there's any, requirement from this committee.
So the beginning of the year, I don't know if that makes a difference in their budget, but it might be a good time to do it. I have no
Well,
problem
the
with
thing
it.
with East Hampton is they will retrospectively give you a grant. Suffolk County won't. You have to like get the approval of the grant beforehand, which is like so painful.
But the devil's in the details because it's a question of how much, right?
Right, but
There are-
David
there are-
Rhodes can
there
be
are
your,
Companies out there that specialize in doing the grants,
Mhm.
so you could reach out to David Rhodes should be able to.
Yeah.
reach you.
expediters?
Or Kelly Risotto knows also.
Yeah, there are companies that just specialize in sanitary system,
Right.
IA grants.
All right, I feel like there's some room for some constructive engagement here.
all right,
I hate to ask you to come back one more time, but if you could do that.
Come back one more time. The point being that I really would like to get started
I'm
on
sure.
this. The other thing is, I'd like to have a time period so that I can spread out the cost. So that we're not talking, if I get a grant, then I'll go right ahead with the grant. But just out of pocket.
Yeah.
I'd like.
Well, this is some of the feedback I'm hoping you'll get back from David as well. Once we can agree on some sort of appropriate system for the property. Denise, does that sound fair?
That sounds fair.
Okay.
I'm confident he didn't look up the
Yes.
seaward side, because I would have told, if it were me, it wasn't me, it was Kelly, but I would have told him to stay on the landward side purposefully. But
Normally we
really-
would.
That's kind of the intuitive.
Yeah.
you made a really good point.
All right.
The wetlands, being
Okay,
circumferential.
very good. Thank you guys.
Wait a minute, we're not done.
Go.
We're not done.
No.
There's another issue here.
Say one more thing too.
I'm sorry, yeah, before they go, we do want to clean up a couple other items.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I want to understand if we're gonna go this route, that we're gonna get an approval.
well, wait a minute, we want to see what he comes up with, right?
Well, I'm saying, if they come up with something that solves the septic issue and I can tolerate it and it's that I can have the
Yeah.
appropriate time, that we're gonna get.
yeah, that's really something I personally cannot do. I'm not sure you can get that from anybody else on the committee, but I think Mr. Sharp has a few more questions as well, so let's
Well,
just see how
I
it
guess
goes.
the
You can make your own
staircase,
judgment.
the staircase is an issue, and I don't understand why the neighbors had to put in a $35,000 staircase and Richard doesn't.
Well,
I don't know why.
let me address that. First of all, I don't know that they had to or not. They certainly ended up doing that. They had no staircase there before, so the erosion from the path was always an issue, and there was going to be nothing growing. My staircase, though it's aluminum and it was put in 2017, 5 years before I bought the house, I had no idea that there was any issue about it. And I don't know why there's an issue with aluminum, but it's permeable. You can see the sun goes through it, the water goes through it. It's only 6 steps as opposed to theirs, which is about 15 or so. And if it's not there, it's going to be a path again where there's going to be erosion just from the use of the path and no planting that we're going to hold. So I think the staircase as is, which has been before this committee in the context of 2 different, hasn't ever been evaluated by the committee, but it's been before the committee in the context of 2 different prior applications, is something that I don't feel responsible for in any way in changing or spending a lot of money on putting wood as opposed to aluminum, when the aluminum's gonna last much longer and it serves every single purpose that the wood staircase serves next door.
Brent, do we have any history of approving aluminum or non-wood staircases and other structures in buffer areas?
So there's no issues with aluminum. The spacing on the stair treads would be consistent with through flow material or greater, and if they can document that, then that's not an issue.
So
The 2 things that come to mind, you know, with regards to this matter are, 1, every structure requires a permit from this board. You know, if a permit was not issued, one does need to issue regardless of what the structure is.
That's why we're asking.
And 2, we do have standards that, you know, we do want to make sure are addressed as part of the design of every structure that is permitted. So generally, and again, I understand that there's a cost associated with this, but to make the record complete, there usually is a set of engineered plans or drawings that specify, that outline the specifications of the structure to give the board the ability to assure what it is it's permitting, so that it does have the sustainability factors associated with it. The aluminum itself is not an issue.
Well, we provided photographs of exactly this stairway that we, with the application that came
So-
before the board right now. Engineering it, I mean, it's just a stairway that
lovely.
they put in, my predecessors put in there, obviously without any permit or anything.
So,
It's the same height off the sand as the one next door.
No, it's not.
It is.
Richard,
Well, the sand changes all the time. but
okay, so
I measured
the history of this staircase is that before it was aluminum, there was a lot of other things that the Rabinowitz did. You're asking us to approve something that's non-conforming, and I don't know that we have the authority to do that.
I'm sorry, non-conforming in what way?
It's not it hasn't been permitted, and it
Well,
wouldn't.
we're asking for a permit.
It wouldn't be permitted by what the neighbor had to do and what all of the other applications have to do is make something that goes up 26 to 30 inches above grade. You can see today, you can go out there today and see that it was never designed to be that. It was never designed that way. It's crazy. The reason that this is there is the same reason that your neighbor, which is that this getting to the beach, you erode the sand going there. And I think you have a house on the beach, that's how you're gonna get there. But the code says to do that, you have to go over the sand by 20 to 30 inches so that you don't hurt any potential growth. Whether granted the treads are permeable, et cetera. But you don't have the 20 inches underneath there.
Well,
No.
it depends what you're measuring. If you're measuring where the treads are going down, yes, there is.
there's a
approximately
picture
20
right
inches.
here.
The problem, you're saying that at the top of the little dune or the embankment,
Uh-huh.
it ends at the top of the embankment. It doesn't go over the top of the embankment.
Well, look what Angela had to do. That's what I'm gonna
I
say.
understand. I'm
So-
not gonna do it, Angela.
So, well, interesting. So, Brant,
Not for $35,000.
Brant. This property came to us as an application about 4 years ago. And I think that was before you were involved with the Harbor Committee. But we were to the point of issuing a permit when the application went away. But it would be interesting to look back in history as to the permit that we had prepared at that time. And to see, I don't know how we dealt with the staircase, but I
It
would
wasn't
add,
brought up.
It was.
Wasn't this-
It wasn't, it was for an addition on a story high, another story.
Right.
Not which I have no long intention of.
No, but I'd just be interested whether or not, when we looked at the property as a whole, whether or not we looked at the staircase. Whether or not the staircase was there, whether or not there was
It
any.
there, but it was not part of the application. It was
Well,
not-
usually, just like it's not a part of your, well, I would just like Brant to look back. And I think, I don't know, what
All
was it, 4 years
structures,
ago?
any structure
was-
built in this
yeah.
area have to be approved by the committee and by the environmental consultant. And I cannot think of another application where a structure did not have accompanying
We were,
drawings and a design.
Right,
Even if you're trying to save money doing it, there's got to be something that everybody can agree on and that our environmental consultant can approve. It's just the way it always has been. So we'd like you to reconsider that.
What's your rough budget for the renovation of the house, for that part?
I mean, for what I'm doing on the 277 square feet. that I'm
Yeah.
Changing, it's about 200,000.
Okay.
Something along that line.
Yeah, it sounds. Um,
did you find it?
something in the letter that was written that you have included here about the creek is inaccurate. Yes, the creek was dredged to mitigate two issues. The primary issue was the erosion of the beachfront in front of, which was then the Rabinowitz house and all the houses to the west. It was, in fact, eroding the staircase there. And there are pictures of that staircase and previous staircases right there that were eroded. So the dredging actually helped your house and all the other houses. It increases the flow, but it increases the flow to the east. So the idea of the dredging was to increase the flow and to mitigate the erosion that was happening across the west. It gave you a little bit more real estate than you had before you purchased the house by a significant amount. The house, unfortunately, is right at a corner of an incredible environmental nexus of two creeks, a substantial 300 acres of wetlands, and facing the northeasterly prevailing winds and storms. Not a good combination. And you will find that maybe this winter, that when you walk down your staircase, you will walk off the staircase another foot or two, because that's what's happened historically. And it happened at the house down the street from you to the west of you that has a hard bulkhead. The bulkhead was blown apart and they were able to repair it. That's a dynamic environment there. And for your consultant to say that the cause of the erosion was the dredging of the creek, that
That's not
just,
what he said.
I read his letter.
No, I mean, what he is saying, as I understand it, and what we've talked about, and the reason I retained him was to determine why the tides were coming from the east, much closer to the house than they ever had been before. I was in favor of the dredging. I thought the dredging was a good idea in principle, although neither the Rabinowitzes nor I got any notice of it whatsoever, notwithstanding the fact that the regulations, the Army Corps regulations, among others, require notice to contiguous properties so that there can be comment about it. Now, put that aside for a second. So I was concerned, once it was dredged, I watched the dredging, saw it, that the profile of the creek changed dramatically. It was much deeper, as you know. The fact is that before the dredging, there was about the same distance between the bottom of the stairs and the highest tide, except when it's very high, it comes up to right up to the stairs. But now it's still only a couple of feet out to the dredged channel. The consequence of the dredged channel, according to Aram Tertullian and First Coastal, after a lot of study and a lot of profiles of this, was that more water was flowing in faster, and the consequence was that it was rising not in the channel itself, but to the east of the house, and it came up on the lawn, and it came up approaching the house within about 10 feet. And that had never happened. Once it had happened close to that during Sandy, But well, other than Sandy, it hadn't come close, and now it's coming up to that level 3, 4, 5 times a year.
Well, that's a consequence of,
That's what's happening
That's
all
what's
over.
happening
the world.
everywhere.
That's called climate change.
No, it's not climate change.
Yep.
Here, it's directly, well, I'm listening to my engineer, my
Yeah,
expert, who I've retained at some substantial cost, First Coastal. He tells me it's a result of the fact that the water is flowing in far more efficiently and flowing out more efficiently, which is what they wanted, was the purpose. As a result, the whole wetlands is filling up to a higher degree. And that's what's happening now, and it changed overnight.
I have to say, I disagree with you. I've watched islands that I've been to for 20 years and the tide used to be 20 feet out. And now they've had to build up a walkway and there's only an inch. All throughout Sag Harbor, especially if you look by Barron's Cove where A dock is now. That used to be a long sandy beach with a 5 to 6 foot stretch. That is a rare thing to
Yes.
see now. The tides are, everything's shifting.
Well, it happened overnight, so this is odd.
Well,
I mean, it happened literally.
It's gonna
right
continue.
out of the dredging. No,
so
it
are we
happened.
getting off topic?
Yeah,
we are
Let's-
definitely.
let's
I
let
just,
Joe-
I
Let's wind it down.
I think Drew Bennett would not agree with your engineer's results. That's why I just wanted to go on the record. I think that we have to move forward about the staircase. I think that the idea of your engineer working with Nelson Pope Voorhees to come up with 2 alternatives is a really good idea, and that will help.
Something to minimize
Yeah,
the engineering, but
let's
just
see if there's a,
conceptually
let's see
something
if there's
that-
a affordable,
Yes.
pragmatic solution, because I'm sure you're in the spirit of that, and move forward.
Okay, the staircase does concern me because of exactly what you said, $35,000. I mean, I talked to Angela last night about this. She's outraged at having to have done this. She's writing to the mayor. Money that was extracted from her is infuriating to her. And she sees, I don't want to have to go through that.
One of the things that she talked about, and I want to mention this to Brandt, is that you're right, and Angela's right. So the cost of the walkway was X, and then she was given a bill by the village for subsequent fees, probably by Nelson Pope Voorhees. We live and die by them. I think it's fair to ask an applicant on something that's a small project like this to say, look, I've got some bids for the engineering, for the design of this staircase. And I would like to know before I go on this route, what is it going to cost me in the additional fees? And I don't want to talk to Brandt and ask him to come up with a solution right now, but I think it's a fair question to say, look, I'm a homeowner. I can't just have an open checkbook for things beyond the actual cost of the building. I understand the fee for the permit, for DEC, for all of those guys. But then and then all of a sudden the village comes in and says, or a consultant is charging you this amount.
Well, I'm sorry,
No,
Will,
that's
we're
not-
asking Brand to get involved. We're asking him to work
No,
with
no, no,
David
no,
Rhodes.
no, I
That's gonna
think he
cost
should.
this gentleman money.
No, I think he should get involved. I said for smaller projects, I think it's fair to ask a consultant, as you're an attorney, both of you, sometimes people come into you and say, I have a limited budget. Can I do this for this amount of money? And you say yes or no. And that's the cost of doing business.
Well, I understand that, but for instance, if the issue is the height of the top of the stairs above the sand, then I could keep the same stairway I have, add a couple of steps and put a couple steps down. Now, that kind of thing would be probably not very costly. But replacing the entire stairway and going through with what Angela went through is not something you're gonna do.
Brant, is this something that you could address by way of their contractor submitting a drawing to you? It has to be engineered in your view?
I'm not quite sure your question.
Does it need
Well, in other words-
to be here? Could Kelly do a drawing, like? or-
Can they retrofit the existing staircase?
Or you could get Angela's plan.
Yeah,
Put
exactly.
over.
So it's just about reliable information,
Okay.
part of
Yeah.
the plans are, you have to recognize that the person that's drawing the plans is going to understand grades, and slopes, and
Right.
engineers are usually the ones that go through 4 or 5 years of college to
Right.
understand how to do
All right.
those things. I'm not saying this, nowhere do I believe that the code requires a licensed engineer to do that work. So you can happily submit, there are qualified people that can do that. I wouldn't think that you want us to look at rudimentary drawings and try to interpret.
Richard, the most cost-effective way is to talk to Matt Ivins, who just left this room.
Matt Ivins?
Yes, he designed the project for Angela, and he's a gentleman and really fair price. You won't get a better price than from him.
Well, the thing is that, of course, Nelson Pope Voorhees has given us a completeness letter for this project and never looked at the stairway for a moment as part of the problems that arise to issue a completeness letter.
We don't go, it's not standard practice for anyone to go, that I'm aware of, this board, Doris, myself, the building inspector, to go looking for violations. This is, you know, if you're saying that you bought the property with the staircase in place, you know, New York State's a buyer beware state. You bought the structure without proper permits, it's your responsibility to get the permits or remove the staircase. That's just, you know, we're not in the practice of looking at every project and going back through all the files to understand what's permitted and what's not. It did come to fruition, perhaps by somebody who sits on the board or by chance saying, hey, I don't know how this staircase got here.
Well, Will said that to me many years ago, a couple of years ago.
And then when we take into the files, we don't find the permits, so then we're like, yes, we have no record of the permits existing, so it's then up to you to say, oh, we do have them.
My option is simple, take it out, and then there's gonna be a path there. That's what the option is.
So just also,
It's much worse than having that staircase.
Mr. Emery, just so you know, this board is not the only board or not the only regulatory body that you would need to go through to have that structure legally existing. You do need to get a permit from the.
I understand, so the answer is just to take it out and just walk on the sand, which is easy enough to do, which is really stupid, because it ends up being ecologically much less beneficial. The stairway now preserves that berm to a greater degree than walking on a path there.
Well, that's unclear.
It's very clear. No, that's clear. If you walk on that path, and if you go up and down that side,
I would agree with that.
what?
I agree with you.
There's no question.
Right.
So let's be,
Thanks,
you know,
Will.
pragmatic at some point, makes sense. And doing things that are right for the ecology is your whole purpose. And all I want to do is do the same thing. And there's been no degradation of that berm whatsoever because that stairway is there. So we're talking about technical requirements in the abstract that do not apply in this situation.
Well, they do apply.
Well, they may apply, but they don't serve the purpose that this Carver Committee exists for. It just doesn't, because my option is just to take it out, which is exactly what I'll do.
I have a question. If you take the stairway out, would the pathway through the NDNF zone still be on the plans?
We label it on the plan.
So I'm
Can you have a pathway to nowhere?
Now the pathway down to the beach.
That's a pathway to the beach.
You're guaranteed access to
Pass
the
this
beach
over.
by
Oops.
state law.
I guess.
I own
Pass
access
this
to
over.
the high tide.
So,
I
Brent,
saw it.
Question for
Pass it
you,
over to him.
where,
You-
if there's an elevation change in an NDNF, is there a specific
Pass it over.
requirements to have stairs? Like if you come to a bluff, even if it's a 3 or 4 foot bluff,
That's a good
you
question.
can
They
have,
haven't had
can you have a
stairs.
path that ends at a bluff?
Yes.
They didn't have stairs next door for years. They put $35,000 into that stairway just because they wanted a stairway. Had nothing to do with any obligation on their part.
Well, Angela hasn't owned it for years.
She owned it, she's owned it as long, before I owned mine.
Yeah.
Yes, it is years. She came here in 21, at least 2021.
All right,
And
guys,
never-
we are not going to solve this today.
Well, I think we should
so-
think about how to solve it practically instead of.
It's a very good point, and your point.
Can I make just a quick comment?
Very briefly, John, we want to
I'm just
move
gonna say,
on.
you know, what was discussed here, again, it seems to me a very simple matter to modify that stairway. It's a stairway like that with a few steps. It's not very complicated, you know, and raising it to meet the requirements should not be very, you know, very expensive at all. And drawings necessary to show those measurements that it meets the requirements. All you're talking about is height above, you know, above grade basically is the requirement. So that's not very complicated. I think you really ought to look at that and you know, not make more out of this than it is.
I'm happy to look at it, John. I absolutely am, and I will look at it, but I don't want to promise in any way, shape, or form. I'll definitely work on the septic system, because I think that's really important. The stairway is ridiculous.
Got it. Okay, thank you very much. Shall we adjourn to the next meeting?
Yeah, I make a motion to adjourn this until February sixth.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
All
Aye.
right,
Good.
Thank
very
you.
much.
we got it.
Okay.
Wanted to sue us after
what?
we drive.
I just see something in the package about a,
He was gonna do the trustees. He did sue the trustees.
we have a conformity letter. Is that something we have to act on? JR, is that something that we need to look at?
I don't have that in front of me. Can you put it on the,
Doris, is there something here that I saw? I'm
Parties.
thinking about the parties and what was that letter?
Here it
The new
is.
local law
Oh, this is on assemblies, mass public.
from the trustees, I think?
Yeah.
Yes, consistency review to a, for a
Consistency.
change in the village code regarding the requirements for assemblies.
So can our lawyer brief us on what the bottom line is on this?
Yeah, I don't think he has seen it.
Is John on? Oh, he's not on it?
yeah, I'm on it. I'm trying to find it right now.
Okay. This is the guy who put in the retaining walls, walked away from us.
I have no conception.
He says he can't afford this and that.
Yeah,
He bought the house
exactly.
for $4 million.
Has anybody looked at this?
No,
Oh.
I need a lawyer to walk me through
Guys,
that.
have you looked at this?
I have, yes.
What are they talking about?
I know.
JR,
Throwing a party.
have you looked at this
The
yet?
village can throw a party if they like.
relevant
No, Doris, did you send this to me?
Yes, it was emailed to you December 13th.
December 13th.
The village wants it.
I mean, is this something we have to act on now? Because I don't think anybody is really prepared to do so. Unless we want to take the time now to have JR read it for the first time. I don't think that's entirely fair.
No, why don't you digest it, JR, and then bring it up in the next meeting, or?
Well, I don't know, the village board might be.
They want to
you know,
move
hot
on it.
trot on it. They may
Want
want
us to
to.
vote on it
They
now?
want to move on it for the next trustees
January
meeting.
14th.
Well, let me suggest, I mean, we do have almost 2 weeks before that meeting. So, you know, we could review this and have a recommendation from council by that time.
Yeah,
I don't think this is anything that particularly pertains to, to harbor committee issues, wetlands, et cetera, so, water.
And we could do that by email or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, we can. I'm looking at it right now. Just give me one.
He says it's okay. I don't have a problem with it. But
Well,
looking at it like that.
they're asking the harbor committee to do a coastal consistency analysis, but
I got that.
I'm not sure that that's, I mean, this is for it's for their local law that regulates special events.
Is this something they want us to vote on, or do we have to vote on this?
We're supposed to make a comment as to whether it's consistent with the LWRP.
John, your suggestion was a good one. Why don't we let JR digest this
Yeah.
and get back to us in writing before the next meeting with within a week. Can you do it by then, John, JR?
Yes.
Because we shouldn't be forcing you to make a decision on a legal issue, none of which we're aware of either.
Okay.
Thanks for
Okay,
that.
and then just send it to Doris and she would disseminate.
All right, guys, I think that is it.
So I have one question.
Yes.
So Lily brought this up because they're replacing bulkheads and stuff down at A dock and B dock. And-
East and Cove West.
Pardon me?
They're
Yes.
not A dock and B dock. This is a
It's-
private marina, Cove East, Sag Harbor Cove Marina.
Okay, so then I'm confused. Then I guess I misread what you sent.
So When I,
It's in the area of ADOC.
when I sent those pictures out, it seems like we gave permission. I remember doing the bulkhead around the beacon.
Oh, yeah, around the
But I
beacon.
do not recall ever discussing around
Yeah.
the other area.
I obviously wasn't here at the time, but I do
West.
remember reading the agenda and looking at the plans, being interested. Obviously, I work with that marine all the
Right.
time. And I remember seeing the
Okay,
application for both.
okay.
And Grant said that there's an
Well-
application for both addresses.
Should they have had those,
Silt fence kind of thing.
exactly, what are they called?
Silt fences.
The,
No, they're-
Curtain.
curtains.
A
Yeah.
silk curtain?
So yes, that's a standard of the permits. And every time you see a bulkhead project going on, if you don't see the silk curtain in place, you need to contact the building inspector and say, you know, there's an issue, we don't think they're in
Which,
That's what we did at
We
Barron's
had-
Cove and then they came out and they.
and
put
we
it
had an issue.
After the
And
fact.
so what would be the can we ask you to reach out to the building department? Is that how that would work?
You can reach out to the building department, just put them on notice, say, hey, I was down at the property.
I think I was
Just
down
show
there
them
and
pictures,
spoke
say,
to
I don't think they're
Tien.
in compliance with the permit, please check up on them. Cause this is,
Right.
as you saw, you know, this is leaching material into the waters.
All right, and I'll
And I-
mention it to Gene as well.
We have no
so-
authority, by the way,
Yeah.
you know.
No,
No, I
no,
understand,
no.
understand.
It's better coming from you.
Yeah, but we don't really actually have that authority either.
No, we have the authority to tell the building department
course
that
we
we
do.
think that
Any
there's
we
a,
don't-
yeah, exactly right.
And also, since this is the same project that they've now disavowed and not used the silt curtain.
Let's try a all faceted.
Is it the same
approach,
GC?
so-
Yes,
See, that's funky.
that's.
It's Costello,
Costello
Yeah,
was
that's
doing,
funky.
you just was,
which I
yes,
think they know what they're doing.
Of course they
they
do.
do.
They had that curtain out there that right after 10 and it's used, it wasn't brand new. They just didn't put it
Why
out
don't you
there.
reach out to them? You know
I'm
what we're
sorry,
talking
so
about.
is there a silk curtain there now?
I don't know if there is. Is there a curtain out there now?
Lily?
What?
Did they put a curtain out there
The
now?
I've
marina
not
deck.
been down there
Yeah.
What's
since.
going on? Just-
Okay, so
I'm sorry, what's the status right now? There's a curtain there, there's not a
No,
curtain?
there's
There's
just
not.
one in the corner by
What do
where
the
the
curtains look
fire
like? How
boat.
do we?
It looks like a
It's a
swimming
little-
pool, like the edge of a rubber swimming pool. And it does that. It just
And it
stops.
just floats on the water?
Yeah,
On top
and
of
I think it has a little bit of a fence
Curtain?
coming down. And you know, when they did Barron's Cove, there was a lot
So
of,
it is there.
Well, but it's just in this corner.
or they
which
may
is
have assembled it. We
Like
should-
it should be all
But
the
is
way
that-
around the job if you're doing this. Am I correct, Brent?
Or does it only have to be where they're working at the
Like-
time?
It should fully encompass the.
Yeah,
project.
area of disturbance.
Okay.
This area then doesn't leach out. So say if there's a curtain here,
Funky that
with
those
a
guys get
tide
away with
with
that.
that funk would.
Brent,
go
is
out.
there- whistle on it.
They-
Obviously, you have to be able to get a boat and a crane in and out while you're working, otherwise you have to remove the curtain, while you move in
Oh,
and
yeah.
out.
They're mobile.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
they're meant.
But they're not like 110% of the time have to be there until the project's.
Well,
done.
that's just
You can remove
practical.
them.
You just say, open it up, let the boat come in.
Right,
Yeah.
as much as practical.
Close it back, open it
Yes,
up.
Very much is tricky and again, the idea is to capture as much siltation as possible.
Right,
To keep it out of the waterways or in the immediate vicinity, because you do have the ability to do reclamation, dredging, you know, any material that might fall into the basin side of the bulkhead can just be scooped right out and put right back behind the bulkhead.
And that's funky stuff behind the bulkhead.
Oh, yeah.
That's years of accumulated funk.
The
That's,
idea is to keep it as contained as possible.
yeah.
So right now,
Adrian
who is
is-
gonna talk to Tien
Adrian's gonna
tomorrow?
reach out to the owner, the
the
applicant.
manager.
I've spoken to Tien about this.
And what did he say?
Well, let's,
I made
Well,
him
I'm
aware
asking
of
where we
this.
are.
I am going to speak to Gene. So all we can really do is speak
Who's
to
Gene?
the trustee who's our liaison to the building department.
Gene Kane.
So,
Well, that seems like an
Actually, no, we should-
unnecessary.
well,
reach
no,
out
it's
to
it's
Tien
three,
because I
it's
felt-
three different things here going on. So I don't see any reason why we can't have
Marianne, I did
All-
not
more
speak
than
to him
one.
I'll
about
reach
it.
out to the manager and I'll ask him what's going on, is, you know, somebody took these photos on this date, can you give me an explanation?
And then
why?
let us know, just
Right.
let us know. That'd be
Yeah.
great.
Because tomorrow's Friday and then there's the weekend and every day there's like more of this pollution going
I'll
into
let
the
you guys
water.
know as soon as I hear
I'm
back
not
from
worried
him.
about you. I'm worried about going through the trustee who can be very on
Is-
top of things, but there's just delays. So I would just like to see that get in place, because you're right, Costello knows full well what they have to do.
I
Right.
think it's-
And now
I
this
won't
is like
be able to
2
go down there now,
weeks,
and it
right?
May or may not be there right now.
I think
I
it's
mean, we're
all,
going off of a photo that was at one
I
point in
think
time.
they'll be back, everything stopped working. I mean, I haven't seen any progress.
Well, we've had rain, let's just
Yeah.
find out, report back to us,
Before
Adrian.
we jump to the building department and send them a fine or something like that,
Yeah.
waste somebody's time.
excellent. All right,
But
I
it's
think
not
that's
for-
it,
Well,
guys.
I'm sorry, so
I think,
it's not for us to find out if it's still going on. Shouldn't we ask the building department to go?
but
Because we
Tiem's had
get
a death in
lectured
the
about
family.
We've
thinking of
already asked-
enforcement.
We've
Bruce
already,
Scavone.
we've already
Right.
spoken to, Tim via Lily. She's already
She
reached out
said
to
she
you.
hasn't.
I haven't.
Oh, I thought you just said
No,
you
I
did.
thought, I am incorrect. I'd spoken to him about something
I
else.
see, okay.
I thought the conversation between all of us clarified
Okay,
things.
Jim is out for the week. He'll be
Right,
back
she's
in
got
on
a death
Monday.
in his
Do you wanna,
family.
do you wanna reach out to him yourself
Or
on Monday?
Bruce, do we
And just
speak
tell him
to?
that this came up?
Are you looking at me?
Either one of you.
I think, are you not here?
I'm happy to
You're
do
the
it.
chairperson. Yeah.
Okay, I'll reach out to, Jim. You'll reach out to the
The manager.
Manager.
See if I get some more
Yeah.
information.
Do we
on it.
speak to Bruce because he's code enforcer?
No, just
I think
let's
that's-
find
no,
out,
yeah,
let's
I
just
think this
find
is
out
good.
what.
Yeah, we'll put some
Okay.
feelers out.
Bruce
If we
works
find out
for-
there's, I think if we
Yeah.
see that this is clearly a violation, then
Right.
we'll go.
Good, all right.
Okay, thank you.
Any more discussion anywhere? Anybody? Okay, good. Do I hear, just a motion to adjourn? Is
I
that
make a
the,
motion to adjourn this
Second?
meeting.
I'll second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you guys very much. Happy New
Brad.
Year, everybody.
Can I
Thank you.
ask a
Happy New
question?
Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Don.
Happy New Year.
Happy New
Uh,
Year. See you next month.
Find out.
Was
Type
it,
us a little email.
Brant, was I making
You type us
hey,
a
I'd like
little
you guys to
email, what'd
opine
you
on
find?
this.